Okay, so I think that's working. Right, so the first question you're going to get in the Normans paper will be one which asks you to study interpretation A, likelihood is, and this question says, how convincing is interpretation A about the impact of the Normans on English monasteries? So we will always say, how convincing is it? Okay, that's how the question will always start. What is that question asking you? It says, explain the answer using the interpretation and your contextual knowledge. So the crucial thing it's asking you to think about there is, can you say what in summary does the interpretation tell you? In this case, about English monasteries. What's it telling you? And then the second thing, really importantly, can you explain what it says using your knowledge? Is it true? If so, can you explain why it's true? Or is it false? Again, if so, why? Or does it not include something? Okay? You don't necessarily need to talk about whether it's true and false. It might be just you're going to use your knowledge to explain why what you see there is true and therefore convincing. Okay? That's the fundamental thing. So I would always start by taking the source. I'll just lower that a little bit so it's a bit clearer. And I would sort of underline what I think is important in this source. So it says, English monasticism after the conquest was transformed. So that means changed, doesn't it? So the question says, what was the impact of the Normans? And clearly we can see the interpretation said it was changed. Okay, how was it changed? Well, it says they built new monasteries. They had to accept new Norman superiors, which means new people in charge. And it says there was they breathed fresh intellectual life into the English monasteries. So really, if I was to summarise what this is telling me about the Norman impact on the monasteries, I would say it was a major change to what went before. Okay, it was a huge change. The Normans came in and they changed monasteries. Okay, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple as a summary. The most important thing you need to do when you get this paper is to take aspects of this and to try and explain it using your knowledge. So I want to explain stuff about, is it true? Did they build new monasteries, for example? Okay, so I'm going to make some little notes. And actually, yeah, I know they did. For example, I know they built 24 of these so-called Cluniac monasteries. Okay, I know they built 24 from 1066 to 1135. So they were new, so I'm proving it's true using my knowledge. Did they occupy them with monks from France? Yes. They were led by monks from France. New Norman superiors. Tension was heightened by the lack of respect shown for English customs. Well, what do I know about what monasteries were like before the Normans turned up? Well, before the Normans turned up, we know there were issues with the fact that standards for the behaviour in monasteries were quite low. You know, monks weren't adhering to their vows properly. They might have women in the monasteries. They might not be attending all the church services, that kind of thing. So they wanted to change things. They breathed fresh intellectual life into the monasteries. So what new things did they introduce into these monasteries? Well, these new Cluniac monasteries were all about being closer to the rules of Saint Benedict. So they were all about making it more sort of stricter. Okay, what kind of things did they introduce? Well, they introduced what's called a new liturgy, which is a new church service, okay, for a start, and they introduced new rules for monks that they all had to follow, okay. And it says new learning from the continent, and it's true, they made them more like the French monasteries that were there before, okay. So really what I'm doing is, you can see I've used my knowledge of monasteries and I've really agreed with it quite a lot, and that's fine. So I'm just going to put that out a bit there, and I'm going to think to myself, well, how would I turn that? And remember, obviously I'm taking longer than you would perhaps take to do it, but I'm trying to explain through it. So what would that look like in an answer? Well, I'd summarise the first bit very quickly. I don't want to spend too long on summarising it, so I'm just going to do that very quickly, and I'm going to say this interpretation suggests the Normans introduced major changes to monasteries. I don't want to spend too long on that because I'm just going to pick bits out. For example, it says that they built new monasteries, and I know that 24 Cluniac monasteries were built by 1135. Okay, these were led by the abbot of Cluny in France, not English abbots. Okay, so I'm using my knowledge to say why I've picked something out and say why it's true. Okay, it also says they showed a lack of respect for English customs. The Normans wanted to reform English monasticism, which they saw as not paying close enough attention to the rules of Saint Benedict. Okay, so again I'm saying, yeah, look, they didn't show respect for what went before. And then I'll take one other thing. It says they introduced the historian also says that they introduced new customs, and this is true as Lanfranc brought a new church service, liturgy, and new standards for monks and nuns' behaviour. Now what I want to do is just summarise very briefly. I'm not going to spend, because I've used quite a lot of knowledge in there. Therefore I find this view very convincing as monastic reform was significant under the Normans, making English monasteries closer to their French counterparts. Okay, so I'll put that there. Sorry, I'm writing slightly on the wonk. I'm going to stop that. Okay, now what I've done